I have to say, I really love being in this living room.
You know what?
We're filming now.
Okay, I'm like
talking for an hour. That's how this works. I just come to our house and hang out. But now we're going to get down to business. So now we're episode 52. But I still look around and I'm like, I just like such an upgrade from my podcast studio.
Well, except for one thing, we still don't have dining room chairs. This is what happens. You buy in Toronto. You have no furniture.
Yes. But back to our other no, it's not. But back to our other episode, like that. Those are the things. The full circle. That can. Yes, I remember when I bought my first house. We had not first house. Sorry, when we bought our forever house, we had this huge dining room, and I remember like back then our agent saying, you know what, it's going to be a bowling alley till you can afford it. Like that's it. A lot of people just like put up, foldable, collapsible chairs and that type of thing until they can afford to get there and fill that room. It is what it is. So we are talking not about furniture today, but about something very close to the affordability issue, at least that's my perspective, is pre-cons. So the question is, are pre-cons dead? Are they dead? Is that, sorry to all developers, they're not going to be very happy with me to say that, but so yeah, I really, I think most importantly, I think we need to explain what a pre-con is, because I say that to people all the time. They're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So you can buy a pre-con or you can buy a resale condo. You can of any product, but let's just go with condos because that's what we're going to talk about today. And a pre-con means that they set up those sales centers that you see all over the place, and you go in and you're buying it pre-construction. So before they put a shovel in the ground, they need you to come and buy up to, what is it again, 70% or 80% has to be sold?
I don't recall, but I think it's closer to 80. Like there's a significant piece that has to be sold.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense, right? So let's go with 80%. So 80% of all units of any project has to be sold before they break ground, according to law, and that is so things do not go bankrupt halfway through, and that's the way that the government or the city decides, that it's a viable project, right? That's, by the way, why you might see a sales center there longer than others, because it's taking them longer to sell 80%. Or you can buy a resale that is already on the market and done and finished and has someone living in it, and you're just buying it from them just like you would buy anything else.
And this is where I think it gets interesting. So you sit there going like, so what's the advantage of a pre-construction? Well, the biggest piece and why it got so popular is that you don't have to put the 20% down, that down payment. Instead, that down payment is spread out in like 5%, 2%, whatever increments across several years until, boom, you actually have to buy it. Also in pre-construction, the legal difference is that when I buy a physical home, I have bought the physical home. In pre-con, you don't really take ownership and you don't get actual title transfer, title in your name, until the project is actually completed.
Which, by the way, we need to talk about that, because if you, depending on the floor that you buy, whether you're paying rent that doesn't go to your mortgage, anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but so what would you say on average now, because you've got your notebook and you're so good at, but what would you say?
No, it's right over here.
What would you say is the average length for a condo project from, like, let's say they get 80% sold and they're like, okay, we're going to start now. Do we say it's like 2 years?
I would say more.
Is it more now?
I think because of the pandemic, it's even accelerated to longer.
Right.
And in fact, what we've seen post-pandemic, okay, one little thing that I want to just get onto before we go into how long it can stay. Or actually this relates. So what happened is people would say, look, that's a much cheaper, more affordable solution to like spread out my quote unquote costs. I don't have to worry about my mortgage for years. Because like 2, 3, 4.
Said everybody during the pandemic. Yeah.
Like said people several years ago saying, oh, you know what? Oh, and first of all, they can't lock in a mortgage because you only get your mortgage after, like, once title is about to transfer on close date, which can be pushed back several times, by the way, by a developer too. So like what they say is the close date may actually not be the close date, and that can extend to like well over a year. There's certain rules and parameters in place, but they have a lot of flexibility. Okay, so why does this matter?
I was gonna say, I'm thinking like break down people who like have never even thought of pre-con. Like, and I get this a lot when people ask me, like, what are those pros and cons?
Yeah.
So I feel like you touched on it. Let's go through it. Like, so the pros of buying a pre-con, as you said, you don't have to show up with 20% or 10% or whatever it is.
Mortgage, don't even worry about it.
Don't worry about it for now. Well, you should, but yeah. So you have 2 years to come up with the full deposit. So let's say
It's always even more.
Okay, great. So like, let's say you have $20,000 in the bank right now. I can give the developer $20,000 to put, and by the way, it can be, I've heard like,
I've seen way less.
$1,000. Like I've seen really, really low.
Yeah.
And then depending on the contract, they stagger it out. So that's one positive, is that if you buy a resale, you have to do your mortgage now, you have to come up with your deposit, you have to do all that stuff now. You don't get the 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
So you can save.
Yes. Another advantage that existed only a decade ago and has since changed.
And gone, and not coming back.
It's
not
like,
coming back.
This was a decade, is that you were buying in place value, meaning today, what would a condo sell for value versus what will this condo sell for 5 years from now? So about a decade ago, that's how it was
I never
priced.
bought anything.
And so what you were basically doing, you were paying today, like you were basically giving $5,000 down for a property that will likely increase in value several fold. Builders got wise to this in 2 ways. Number one, what people were doing was they're like, oh, wait a second. I can then just take this piece of paper. Remember, you don't have title and you've put only $5,000 down. And 2 years from now, before I actually have to get the mortgage, et cetera, I'll sell that piece of paper to somebody else.
Called an assignment.
And it's called an assignment, basically saying, yeah, I bought it, 2 years ago at $500,000, but it's actually now gone up $700,000, right? Because now in place right now, condos are going for about that price of whatever, let's say it's a comparable, right? So they would then...
You're crying, I'm not crying.
Yeah, they would then assign it away.
Don't worry about it.
So by putting $1,000 down, you would literally make $200,000, just like that.
Literally.
This is an example. Builders got wise and they start to say, wait a second, I want to make that lift. So now contracts do certain things. So now your your purchase agreement has now changed. And almost, I would say 99%, if not 100% of them say, you cannot assign away your interest, this contract, without letting us know first.
Or paying us. There are some contracts that you actually have to, there's a fee involved. Oh, they're all that now?
All now, fee, legal fee, plus a percent of the lift that you make, i.e. the profit. So that's gone, friends. So that whole
and
ability.
The cost is gone.
Yes, and that I want you to talk about that because you have more boots on the ground with respect to this piece. I remember when pre-con, we were like, this is crazy.
Well, no,
$800 a square foot?
I was going to say, I don't even know if pre-con was that day's value. Pre-con was everyone understood 10 years ago that buying a pre-con condo was cheaper than buying a resale.
Correct.
It was cheaper.
All the time.
It was like going wholesale versus retail, right? Cheap, I'm getting in first, I'm getting bottom rock prices, and
really
it was even
analogy.
cheaper. Oh,
That's a really good analogy, yeah.
Thank you. And then people were like, you know what, I'll buy 2. Right? Because I only have to put $5,000 down, right? And then I can just flip it on assignment. Oh, and let's not even forget the great deals if you had an in friends and family. So there were friends of I had a client who actually was a home inspector part-time, but he worked for a developer. And he said that before it changed, they would sell out at the friends and family. Because think about it, there was no risk. You could take, you could even take off your line of credit and it still made sense. You didn't even have to have the money in the bank. And then you would sell you could flip and make thousands on assignment, or you could rent it out and continue to make a killing. You paid so little for it, the rent would cover it. Back in the days when you could have an investment property and, dare I say, be cash flow positive, which does not exist anymore either. So, these were days where, they're long gone.
Yes.
And now, we'll get into it, but resale condos are less expensive than buying a pre-con because, and I don't, you know what? I still would really love to find a builder that would agree to be on the show with us. But I believe that they get a really bad rap, the good ones, because the city has made it so unaffordable for them to break ground. The fees just to put the shovel in the ground, it's impossible for them to make money anymore. And yes, people are like, we were just having this conversation about a certain builder that'll go unnamed right now of condos. And, you know, they're like, well, the finishes aren't so great and this and that and the ceiling height. And, you know, listen, I get it. Everybody wants quality, but they have to make money too, or they're just not going to they're not going to build it.
Which is what's happening.
So anything else that we would say would be a positive reason to do a pre-con other than
spreading out the costs.
Yeah, spreading out the costs. So, I mean, listen, yes, spreading out the costs, but so I would say that I have had a lot of clients have talked to me over the years who asked me about pre-con. And I always said, don't touch it. Like I literally, like, and by the way, like there are agents in this business that specialized in pre-con and made tons of money and did it very, very well. And I just was never a fan of it. I never touched it. I never sent anybody. I took a client to a sales center once, only because they really wanted to see this project. But otherwise I was like, don't do it. But I think that the massive plus advantage that is now becoming even more advantageous for first-time buyers, and I'm starting to go there myself, is just affordability.
Yes.
Yes, they are priced at, they price them at they value it at what they believe the market will say it's worth in 2 years by square footage, more in my opinion. Right. But you know, so many people can't come up with the down payment. They just can't. I mean, it's just too much for them.
So here's how I'm thinking about it. So first, another good reason to do a pre-con, if you think mortgage rates are going to go down by the time you're going to have to close on the property. And so there's a bit of a mortgage arbitrage, kind of like a bet too, right?
Okay.
Which can sometimes offset the higher cost that you're paying up front.
Okay.
Kind of.
Yeah, you have to be really good at that though.
Yes, exactly. And here's the problem with what caused pre-construction to become dead. And then I want to also touch one of the things.
Do we think it's dead? Are we saying it's dead? Because I think it's dead, but do you think it's coming back?
I think that, let me get to that actually in a second. So lawyer hat on, I remember being in law school, I remember learning about like how pre-con actually works and the contracts that you would sign as as a potential owner of the property. And I was also just like you, I'm like, do not touch it. There's way too much flexibility for the developers to do whatever they want to that property. You can, buy an orange and end up with an apple and there's nothing you can do about it. So like I was,
it's that contract is all, if you bought,
there are parameters, but like, I was not a fan of it from a legal perspective as well, right? There's very little you can do. They can delay it, and there's the interim occupancy fees too. So right before title will transfer to you, the property can be habitable, meaning that you can actually live in it. And the problem is that living in it means that you're paying rent, not rent that goes to your mortgage, but rent that goes into the developer's pocket. Yes, they're not supposed to profit from it, but there's all these fees that make it a little bit questionable, right, Rachel?
Well, no, this is part of the negativity. Like, so you buy into this property. This is the best. Like, really, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, it's actually shocking that this is the way it works. And I think people don't realize. So I buy a pre-construction and it says that the occupancy is going to be fall of 2024.
Yes.
Okay, great. So fall of 2024, it's a 30, I mean, unlikely it's 30, it's probably more, but let's just say it's a 30-floor building. And I'm on the 28th floor.
Right.
Okay. So September 1 comes along, I get my notice. I think they have to tell you 6 weeks in advance. Okay, so we're on time. This is your occupancy. They have you go through, you do your walkthrough. Okay, fine. So September 1st, I now start paying rent. Guess what? It's very, very possible that floors 25 and down are not finished. So now you're dealing with like maybe one elevator. Your hallways are not done. By the way, the elevator is plywood.
Yeah.
There's no concierge. They're having like electrical blackouts. The water doesn't, like they're shutting water off because they're dealing with, like I know I shouldn't be laughing, but I've seen it happen. I had clients who bought, not with me, I sold their house and they had bought a pre-construction and I went to see them it was just to move in. And then for them to come in and out of their condo every day just to go out and walk their dog, they said they waited for that one elevator, sometimes up to 20 minutes. And they were a higher floor because obviously they bought well and all that good stuff, but they were in, I hate to use the term considering the world we're living in, but they were living in a war zone for months while they paid rent that was not going towards their mortgage.
No, and those fees also, I think, are spread across not just every unit, but those that actually can be occupied. Like it can get
you imagine?
really
literally,
sticky.
can you imagine you're in there and then on top of it, if you, theirs for sure was also, most of the time, there's investors still buying it. So now you're living in a building where there's like 20 units for lease and people are coming in and out. And at the beginning, especially the older buildings, less so, but the newer buildings, you have so many renters.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We were just talking about this. There's a building my client's looking at and it's 12 years old, not even a year old. We were just talking about it before we started rolling. And they have 458 units in the status certificate that are being rented.
Yeah. And
that's a lot. I don't care how many units there are.
And the problem with renting or living in a building that's rented is people won't care as much about the property is one, but
there's great tenants, but the reality is you're right.
Yeah, there's always that issue of what if the market turns and these renters can't afford to live there and investors can't afford to hold on to it. Well, that caused for a flood of these properties just being bankrupt or so. And so there's a lot to talk about. Let's go back. Let's go back to what happened during the pandemic, which was
please do.
Nuts.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening.
By the way, and not to interrupt you, but I think that's where some of these headlines came in to effect. But yes, go ahead.
Yes. And you know about this. So not necessarily just during the pandemic, but let's talk more about when interest rates start to go up. So two things happen. One of two things. Number one, people did not anticipate that interest rates would go up higher. So when they originally bought these homes, when it came time to actually get a mortgage, they were given like a 5% interest when they were banking on getting 1-2% interest rates on their mortgage.
So their spreadsheet did not add up anymore.
They couldn't afford it.
Well, or they knew that the rent wouldn't cover the mortgage payments anymore, and all of a sudden that investment changed dramatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
A second thing happened was appraisals. So what happened is we started to see a lot more properties sitting, right? And when it comes to Toronto downtown market, there are like a bit of price adjustments that's happening, not huge, but a little bit. So what ended up happening is these appraisers then said, well, you said, you bought for 200,000, I'm just making up, imagine, but we in fact think it's only worth 150. That $50,000 gap, you got to come up with. And so we did anticipate, and this is something that we should all think about when we read headlines, we were anticipating a flood of assignments coming to market. Okay, did not happen. And it didn't happen for several reasons.
So it's interesting. So there is, before the Trestle laws, there was an exclusive listing WhatsApp chat.
Oh, yes.
Or on Signal. I'm so old. I don't actually know what Signal was. I was on it. I don't even know what it is. But anyway. And then there was an assignment Signal group that also came up. The interesting thing I found about the assignment was, and we've talked about this, about the hysteria of default and that type of thing. There were a lot of assignments. No one was willing to fire sale them.
This is it. Exactly.
So there were people who were like, I had a client at one time who had also read the headlines. He was like, hey, Rachel, what do you think about, get me a deal. What do you think? Nobody was listen. He was, I know. You were like, you asked me also. And I was like, they're out there, but they're not fire saling them.
Right.
So there were all these assignments, but people were like, no, I want to at least get what I put into it or whatever it was. I'm not going to lose my shirt. And they're still not selling, by the way, because the condo market is still having a tough time.
Yes, like stuff is sitting a little bit longer. But here's to your point, a lot of these people that invested are actually savvy investors. They're not like stupid, right? Everyone's like, oh, dumb investors, they don't know what they're talking about. They actually do.
Most of them do.
Yeah, they actually know their cash flow and like have thought about the risk. So they can actually float these properties until they get the number that they want. So let's take a look at some of the data, which I think I'm gonna pull out here.
Please do with your handy dandy notebook.
So I'm gonna compare 2023 versus 2022, just to talk a little bit where these headlines are coming from. So pre-con sales did drop by 41%.
Sales. Like in a sales center or on?
For the entire year, sales volume dropped by 41%, reaching a 15-year low.
Can we say that that was in line with the resale market also?
In 2023, I don't know.
It'd just be interesting because I think we were down also around that same amount. I wonder if it was just like
consistent
in
with
line.
that.
Yes. I think it was.
Let's continue to pack this. I think this goes along with it. So what we're seeing as well in Q4 of 2023 is that unsold inventory of new condos reached an all-time high. That we haven't seen before.
Oh my God, Q4 of 2023. I never want to see it again.
Construction exactly sits in line, but construction in 2023 also hit some record lows.
What was the number I gave you yesterday? I can't remember. It was something like 38 or 48. Now I can't remember. Sorry. Condo projects were temporarily canceled or shut down due to the rising interest rates, which we'll talk about.
Yes, and so here's I'm spelling this out because I want to get I'm building my theory. So we're seeing
Take notes, everyone.
We're seeing a drop in pre-con. Now, developers are not stupid. They have economists that they work with, and they're saying, you know what, we're going to project that maybe there's going to be a bit of a decline. We don't think Bank of Canada is going to decrease rates anytime soon, interest rates, which means housing activity will probably stay a little bit similar to what we're seeing now. And if things continue to be unaffordable and incomes don't increase as well, we're probably still going to see a squeeze in affordability. Okay, here's my point. Okay. So the developer said, well, we're just not going to build. So why do we care?
By the way, why would you? Like literally, I don't honestly do not blame them. And yes, everyone's going to freak out at me about that online. But really, the reality is, why would you build a building that you're not going to make any money in?
Well, you can't sell.
You can't sell it.
You can't sell.
By the way, no one was buying anything in Q4 of last year. No one.
Exactly.
Nothing. Doesn't matter what it was worth. It doesn't matter what it was priced at. No one bought anything last year.
So here's my theory. Okay, we're going to start decreasing, and we're starting to lose a lot of construction happening in the end of 2023, which means yes, we're going to see more condos come to the market in 2024. But I think this is the clincher, and this is where I think it could be a good investment. We are seeing price compression in pre-construction because of the lack of activity. What else is going to happen? We're going to see less supply. Let's say in 2006,
in line with immigration and buyers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we're now constricting construction now. Ontario, there are new rules that are coming in Ontario that may loosen this up and may bungle my theory. But what I'm thinking is, if construction stays as constrained as it is right now, coupled with the fact that we are going to see just natural increase in population, I actually think pre-con may be an okay investment, so long as there are a couple of things. Like you actually have a good developer.
If you bought it now, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I would even wait a little while longer. I still think there's going to be more price compression. And that's why I think if you're looking to own it several years from now and continue to own it for several years, I'm a long time horizon owner. I'm not a flipper. This is not a flip.
But it's like stocks. You buy it and you hold on to it.
Yes.
It's the same idea.
Yes. And so that...
Don't try to beat the house. You'll never win.
Exactly.
You just won't.
And in Ontario, so like, okay, so what does this mean? We're going to have like 24,000, I believe around 24, maybe a bit less, new construction builds coming in 2024.
In 2024?
2024.
So we were down 36,000 last year. Exactly. So we were short 36,000. That's what was canceled. And we're only going to have 24,000 this year. So I know, because when we were on that Benjamin Tall call, he was saying that he believes we'll start to feel that crunch of lack of inventory in condo markets, which, by the way, right now, based on my boots on the ground, is still very soft. and there's a lot of inventory in resale.
What kind of inventory? Is it 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom?
So for sure, I'll tell you that there is a flood, but I also think we've been seeing this for years, is there's way more 500 square foot, 600 square foot
That's the problem.
units.
That's the problem.
But again, it's part of a bigger like snowball. So you think about it, when was the last time any developer could afford to build anything that was bigger than 600, 700 square feet? When you price a condo, you price it by square foot. We've heard us talk about pre-con, you're buying it by square foot, So now when we look at resale, there are other dynamics involved that you take into pricing consideration, but you still, like your mainstays, you're still looking at your square footage.
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. So now you've got a square footage established in a building for resale that's 550 square feet. Okay, and let's say that that's a good building and you're getting $1,100 a square foot. Okay, it's whatever. It doesn't equate the bigger you go up. So just because you've got $1,100 a square foot for a 550 square foot unit, if you're lucky enough to actually find 1,000 square foot unit, you're not getting $1,100 a square foot. And that's how the builders go. So builders can't afford to build buildings with large units anymore. By the way, that's why I tell my clients to look at older properties. Yes, sometimes the maintenance fees are higher. I get it. No problem. You want to find a well-run building with average maintenance fees, but you're going to get more value and you're going to get a better layout than all they build now are these, I call them bowling alley, right? You walk in and you've got this hallway kitchen, I call them, and you've got like, you're sitting here in your couch, your TV's there, and you go throw ping pong at it and it hit you in the forehead when it comes back. And you've got a little like bedroom going back where they decided to put a duct in the corner where like now you can't get around the bed because of the way they put the duct in it. And by the way, the contract is all in the builder's side. So they can move up to 5% of your condo without asking you. I've been called by a lawyer to be part of a lawsuit who said they moved a duct so now the bedroom couldn't hold a queen size bed. And there was nothing like...
There's nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do about it.
That's what I was saying. From a legal perspective, I've never liked pre-con.
They could put a pole in the middle of it. If it's under 5%, there's nothing you can do about it. Oh, no, you have the pole. Oh, well, I guess you'll just put your kitchen table over here, whatever. So the challenge is that we have all of those units on the market because builders stopped building large units for over a decade ago.
There are a lot of investors in this market that couldn't care less. They're kind of getting their per square foot flip, right? Like, and that's why, that's why the 500 square foot room is like what happened. So like, what I would say about pre-con, like, is it dead? Yeah, it has slowed down, but I still think because population growth, lack of supply, and just again, lack of supply, population growth rather, we are going to see these prices actually start to increase. I still think 2006 and 7 is when we'll see that. So if you're willing to hold on for several years and then in the event that those prices don't actually hit that mark, continue to hold on for several more, if that's your strategy, I think it's a great opportunity.
I agree. I think anything that you're willing to hold on to for over 5 to 6, 10 years is worth the money. I think my synopsis would be, I agree with everything you said. I think pre-con is dead from a standpoint of making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of it. Pre-con of buying it as an investment and flipping it on assignment, flipping it within...
Don't even think about it.
Don't even think about it.
Don't even think about it.
Even when you get possession of it and flipping it after a couple of years. I have a client who bought a pre-con. He called me. He said, I got possession. What is it worth? And I told him, he said, not a chance. All right, find me a renter. Put it up. We've got a renter in there. And I am now 2 years in keeping an eye on that building, which is at Yonge and Eglinton. It's a great building, done well by the right builder. And I'm still not at the number he needs to make sure that it would make sense for him to pay the capital gains. We didn't even talk about capital gains. To pay the capital gains on it and still make any money. So you've got to be willing to hold on to it. But oh my God, I think we should do a part 2.
On capital gains?
Capital gains.
On taxes? No, but
Anyway,
absolutely
yeah.
a part, because there's just, again, a lot of stuff that how to consider and what to think about.
Yes.
But I think you've like summarized it perfectly. Biggest piece of
started.
advice though is please get a lawyer to look at your contract, understand what you're
if
talking,
you
what
were
you're
to
assigning.
buy a pre-con without having a lawyer look at it, you've lost your mind. You've lost your mind.
And
No,
one other
just, like
element,
literally, you've lost your mind.
another thing that people don't also realize, when you buy pre-con, you absolutely can negotiate those terms. Those terms are not law. They are just what the developer wants. And things that I would focus on, having the ability to sign this without penalty or without fee. That's a big one, huge one, so that you can, if you need to, get out of the deal without losing a ton of the profit that you're trying to make. I'm not saying that you will make profit, but in the event that you get tied or you can't afford the mortgage because rates haven't gone down as you anticipated, super important.
Call Joel Kadish.
Yeah, he's great.
But I would also say, and this is not a plug for me because I don't do pre-con often, but use an agent.
Oh, of course.
Like these sales centers will be like, oh, we'll give you this discount if you don't bring an agent with you, whatever. And I get it. But if you have a good agent, they'll be able to get the discount for you anyway. And in the end, long term, at least you know, it's almost that multiple representation. Like it bothers me. They have these sales centers and they think you're just coming in and buying a car. Please don't. Please don't.
It's kind of more expensive.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Haffa. Awesome.